The other question was a question asked by Rajat. This is a very good question. What he says is, you say knowledge of ourself does not involve triads. Is that only after realization, or is it true even during practice of ātma-vicāra? It is true even during the practice of ātma-vicāra, as I will explain. But first, for those who are not familiar with this, what is meant by triad here in this context is what in Sanskrit is called triputi and in Tamil called mupadi. That is the three factors of any objective knowledge. In other words, the knower, the knower means the one who knows, what the known, whatever is known, and the means by which it is known. So, for example, if we see a tree, we who see the tree are the knower. The tree that we see is the object known. And the means by which we know that tree is we know it by seeing it. So seeing is the means. What is seen or known is the tree. What knows or sees it is I, the one who, ourself, we ourselves are the knower. As Bhagavan explains in verse 9 of Ulladu Napadu, he uses two words here, irate gal and mupadi gal. Irate gal means pairs. Here it refers to pairs of opposites, like existence, non-existence, knowledge, ignorance, awareness, non-awareness, happiness, misery, life, death, good, bad. All these are pairs of opposites. And mupadigal means this triad, this three factors of any objective knowledge. So what he says is, that is these dyads and triads, that is the pairs of opposites I referred to here as dyads, and the three factors of objective knowledge as triads. So dyads and triads exist always holding one thing. So what is that one thing Bhagavan is talking about here? Dyads are things known by us. Dyads are one of the three members of the triad, because the dyads are included among the things that are known. And the knower is ourself as ego. And the means of knowing, well, there are so many different means of knowing. We know some things by seeing, some things by hearing, some things by reading about them, some things by memory, or some things we know by inference. So there are so many means of knowing. But what Bhagavan means by saying the dyads and triads hold on to one thing, he means they depend upon ego. Why are they dependent upon ego? Because ego is the knower. There could not be anything known without a means of knowing it. So everything known depends upon the means of knowing it. And there could not be any means of knowing anything or anything known if there was not a knower. So the knower is what is most essential. Without a knower, there would neither be a means of knowing anything nor anything known. So the one thing on which dyads and triads depend is the knower, namely ego. In sleep, we do not rise as ego, so we do not experience any dyads. We don't experience any pairs of opposites. We don't experience knowledge or ignorance. We don't experience existence or non-existence. We don't experience, as pairs of opposites, that is, we don't experience pleasure or pain. We don't experience life or death, because these all appear only when we rise as ego. Likewise with the triads, we don't, in sleep, because we haven't risen as ego, we're not aware of any objects. And because we're not aware of any object, there's no means of knowing them. So sleep is a state devoid of dyads and triads. But as soon as we rise as ego in waking or dream, we experience dyads and triads. So dyads and triads depend upon ourself as ego. And then he goes on to say, if one sees within the mind what that one thing is, they will slip off. What is the one thing? It's ego. So if we see within the mind what ego is, they will slip off. That means the dyads and triads will slip off. Why will the dyads and triads slip off? Because we seem to be ego so long as we're looking outwards, away from ourselves, at anything other than ourselves. But when we turn our attention back within to see what we ourselves actually are, ego will subside. And when ego subsides, everything known by it will also subside. That's what Bhagavan means by saying the dyads and triads will slip off if we look within the mind to see what that one thing is, to see what ego is. So to the extent to which we attend to ourselves, but now we seem to be ego, so to the extent to which we attend to ourselves, we as ego will thereby subside, and to the extent that we as ego subside, everything else will slip off. And then he goes on to say, only those who have seen the reality. That means those who have, it can mean one of two things. Those who have seen the non-existence of ego will see the reality, or those who have seen, who have experienced the slipping off of all these dyads and triads have seen the reality. Both amount to the same thing. They will not be confused. So long as we rise as ego and experience all these dyads and triads, we're in a state of confusion, because these dyads and triads don't actually exist. They seem to exist only because we've risen as ego. And ego itself is a confusion, because ego is nothing but the false awareness, I am this body. I am is something different, the body is something different, but we conflate these two together. So ego is itself a confusion. But when we look within the mind to see what this ego is, ego will subside and dissolve back into its source, and thereby will be free of all, and dyads and triads will cease to exist along with it, and therefore will be free of all confusion. So the important point to note here, he says, is if one sees within the mind what that one thing is, they will slip off. The dyads and triads will slip off. So how is that relevant to this question? The question is whether knowledge of ourself does not involve triads, whether that is true only after realization, or is it true even during practice? It is true even during practice, because to the extent to which we attend to ourselves, the dyads and triads will thereby slip off, and we alone will remain. In self-attentiveness, who is the one attending, and what is attended to? The one who is attending is ourself, and what is attended to is ourself. In other words, what we are attending to is only ourself. So we who are attending and we who are attended to are one and the same thing. So there's no distinction there between subject and object. That is the knower is the subject. Everything known is objects, but there's no such distinction in self-investigation, because what we are trying to know is only the reality of the knower. So they're not two things there. The I who is attending and the I that is attended to are one and the same I. In other words, we're attending only to ourselves. So the knowledge of ourself does not involve triads, is true not only after realization, it's also true to the extent to which we attend to ourselves during the practice of ātma-vicāra. That is, we can never know ourselves as an object. So when we're attending to ourselves, we're not attending to any object, we're attending to the subject. Or if we go deeper, we'll understand we're not even attending to the subject. What we're attending to is the reality that underlies the subject. The subject is ego, the false awareness, I am this body. The reality of ego, the reality of the subject, is the pure awareness I am. So that is what we are attending to. So that is our own reality. So we're not attending to anything other than ourselves, but only to what we actually are. In other words, we're attending only to ourselves. In self-attentiveness, the knower and the known are one and the same thing. And even the knowing, the means of knowing it, how do we know ourselves? We can know ourselves only by being ourselves. As Bhagavan says in verse 26 of Upadesha Undiyya, Tanai irtle tanai aridlam. Being oneself alone is knowing oneself. Tani rendatradal undipara, because oneself is devoid of two. That is, they're not two selves, one self to know the other self. The self that is investigating itself is itself the self that is being, that it is investigating. And we know we can attend to ourselves or know ourselves only by being ourselves. In other words, by not rising as, being ourselves means not rising as ego. Of course, we are always ourselves. Even when we rise as ego, we are ourselves. But when we rise as ego, we seem to be something other than what we actually are. So in order to be as we actually are, we need to cease rising as ego. We can cease rising as ego only by holding on to self-attentiveness. To the extent to which we hold on to self-attentiveness, the knower subsides and everything else, and the knowing and the known subside along with it, all become one in the state of pure self-attentiveness. Right? Because the state of perfect self-attentiveness is itself the state of pure awareness. Because pure awareness means awareness that is aware of nothing other than itself. So it is even during practice, but we are going beyond the triads. As Bhagavan often used to say, if the nature of the path were other than the nature of the goal, the path couldn't lead to the goal. So there's a verse in Guru Vachika Kavai in which Bhagavan says, oneself alone is the means and oneself alone is the end. So what we are seeking to know is ourself, and the means to know ourself is ourself. So if the practice involved a triad, then it couldn't lead to the state devoid of triads. So this practice leads us unfailingly to a goal, because the goal is the state beyond triads, the state of oneness, perfect oneness. And so the means can only be the state of perfect oneness. That is why this practice of self-attentiveness, or Swarupa Dhyana, or ātma-vicāra that Bhagavan taught us, this alone is the true Advaita Abhyasa, the true practice of Advaita. Because if your practice involves more than one thing, then it's not Advaita. Advaita means one only without a second. Ekameva Advaitiam. The only practice that can lead to that experience of one only without a second, that practice itself must involve one only without a second. And that practice is the simple practice of self-attentiveness.